Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining today's session, which is focused on the MLC's Manufacturing in 2030 project and our recently released white paper, What's the Next Phase of Digital Evolution? My name is Lauren Bissett, and I'm a part of the Manufacturing Leadership Council team here at the NAM. And before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. You'll note that we have muted all participant lines in order to maintain sound quality throughout the session. However, we do encourage asking questions at any point by placing them in the questions box, which is located probably on the right-hand side of your screen. And we will do our best to address all of your questions either during the session or during the Q&A portion of the event. Additionally, this session is being recorded and will be sent via email within 24 hours of the session concluding, as well as available on the Manufacturing Leadership Council website within 5 to 7 business days. Now, before we begin, we're going to play a quick video. So take a look at this, and then we'll be back in just a moment.
Manufacturing in 2030. What does the future hold? We can't know for certain, but we can shape it. The decisions manufacturers make, the technologies we deploy, the vision we embark on, will define us in the next decade and beyond. Competition's intensifying. Disruption is abounding. Will we just accept a comfortable status quo? Or will we unleash a new engine of production to transform the world? We're manufacturers. The future doesn't shape us. We shape the future. Let's get to work.
Excellent. Now, for today's moderator, I would like to introduce MLC's co-founder, vice president, and executive director, Mr. David Brosell. David, over to you.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I always get excited by watching that video, and I can assure all our attendees that we are indeed going to unleash the next engine of production in the years ahead. So once again, good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad you could join us today to hear about an important work that MLC has recently completed as part of its Manufacturing in 2030 project. First, a little background. In the spring of 2021, as we were working our way through the pandemic, the MLC team started thinking about some of the lessons learned from the trying time we were all in. One of the most important of those lessons was the necessity for manufacturers to be able to act with greater agility and be better prepared for future disruptions, whatever form they may take. We saw the necessity to take a longer view of things to come. And so we began developing plans for the Manufacturing in 2030 project, whose main goal is to enable you to envision what manufacturing might look like by the year 2030, be better prepared to plan for the future, and in doing so, find ways to enhance your value, competitiveness, and contribution to society. The Manufacturing in 2030 project officially launched at our inaugural conference event in New Orleans in December of last year. I know many of you were there. Since that time, the project has been rolling and picking up steam. So far this year, we have held 4 webinars on the project, published 4 thought-leading articles from our project partners in the Manufacturing Leadership Journal, and researched and wrote the white paper we are here to discuss today. Next month, we will host a webinar on the results of our M2030 survey. A major thank you to all of you who participated in that research. In November, we will co-host an M2030 event with project partner EY at MXD in Chicago. And finally, the project this year will culminate in Nashville with our 2nd annual conference event when we concentrate on the future of artificial intelligence in manufacturing. Now, a few comments about the white paper itself. Realizing the goal of envisioning what manufacturing might look like by 2030 entails thinking broadly about the context in which manufacturing will operate in the decade ahead, including the population, demographic, and economic trends that will shape the industry. In addition, it entails understanding the direction and velocity of technological trends associated with manufacturing 4.0, the industry's transition to the digital model of manufacturing. Perhaps most importantly, though, it entails identifying and understanding the challenges that all will face as the industry moves to the next stage of manufacturing 4.0. The white paper that we are discussing today, which is entitled The Next Phase of Digital Evolution, is the product of nearly 7 months' work by the MLC content team. The paper consists of 3 major parts: an examination of megatrends affecting the industry trends and themes, including major technologies such as artificial intelligence, and decision points on the road ahead, including key questions that the industry needs to address. More than 90 sources and references were used in the research. The paper was reviewed by the MLC Board of Governors, our project partners, and selected colleagues from the National Association of Manufacturers. MLC wishes to thank its M2030 project partners, NTT Data, EY, West Monroe, and Infor, for their support of the project and for their invaluable feedback on the white paper. And now, please allow me to introduce our panelists for today. First, Dan Dwight, President and CEO of Cooley Group, who is also the Vice Chairman of the MLC Board of Governors. Randall Kenworthy, Senior Partner of Consumer and Industrial Products Practice Leader at West Monroe. Andrew Kinder, the Senior Vice President, International Strategy at Infor. Brad Newman, Advanced Manufacturing and Mobility Industry Market Leader, Americas at EY, and certainly last but not least, Bhaskar Radhakrishnan, the Senior Director of Manufacturing Industry Solutions at NTT Data. Welcome all. Thanks for being here today. Really looking forward to the discussion and your reflections on the white paper and some of the questions we'd like to entertain. So let me start first. You've all read the white paper. From what I gather, you've all read it multiple times, which of course may be necessary with the length of a paper like this. I want to start with, now that you've finished it, what's your attitude about the future of manufacturing? Are you optimistic, pessimistic, somewhere in between? Which is, of course, a throwaway option there. But I'd like to get your view on how you're feeling about the future of manufacturing after you've read this research paper. Let's start with Randall Kenworthy from West Monroe. Randall?
Great, thanks, David. I'd have to say that I'm optimistic. I think we recognize there's going to be some economic challenges in the short term with the downturn, but I think there's 3 reasons to be optimistic. First is just the investments and innovation in manufacturing. I was recently at the IMTS event in Chicago, where there were over 129,000 participants, really showcasing some of the innovation around additive manufacturing, around robotics, around AI and other digital solutions. So a lot of energy and investment in manufacturing. I think second is, despite some of the challenges with our elected officials, I think there is bipartisan agreement that manufacturing is critical and important to the future economy of the United States. So they have made some progress in the Inflation Reduction Acts, in the CHIPS and Science Act, and then what NAM is doing in terms of advocating for manufacturing. So I think there are recognition that as an industry. And then the third reason I'm optimistic is because, frankly, I think it's going to help address one of the most existential problems of humankind is around climate change. And I think manufacturing as an industry recognizes it needs to be at the forefront and be a leader in terms of addressing this. And earlier today, when we were talking, Dan Dwight was sharing some of what they're doing at Cooley Group is really a leader in manufacturing around addressing this. So I think we have to be optimistic about it because we have to solve this. Failure is not an option.
3 very good reasons to be positive about the future. Bhaskar, what's your perspective?
I feel optimistic as well. I concur with Randall for all the points that he mentioned, but also giving a different perspective to it is that digital is, I look at it from this perspective, right? So digital is not going to be the way of operation, or is going to be the way of operation for survival, even to say. We see that, in fact, it has been mentioned in the research article, the white paper, that almost most of the factories today, if you look at it 10 years back, it was unrecognizable because of the fact that the evolution of technology, the maturity of the organization, the leadership maturity is, what we see today as an industry is because of the fact that we started leveraging the technology. So which means that as the technologies are evolving, the people thoughts are evolving with all the recent challenges around the workforce transformation, especially the shortage of skilled workforce, and the climate change, and also some of the supply chain disruption that we see in the industry. It is only going to evolve, right? Therefore I am optimistic. So I envision this future organization is going to be completely a data-driven digital enterprise that's fully connected or hyper-connected, with more distributed and agile and value-driven ecosystem. So that's the way I envision it. So therefore I feel optimistic about it.
That's great to hear. Brad Newman at EY, do you share Randall and Bhaskar's perspectives, or are there other factors in your mind that temper your perspective?
David, if you focus on the future, I joined both Bhaskar and Randall, and I'm extremely optimistic. There are a lot of disruptive forces at play. We've got advances in technology, new environmental agendas, shifts in global trade flows, just technology innovation like we've never seen before. And the collective sum of all these disruptive forces it's really creating a bias for action and a need for change that is stronger than anything that I've experienced in my 30-year career. And I'm also very encouraged by what I'll call the building blocks that we have in place today. And while technology will continue to get better, faster, and cheaper, we're really not dependent upon any new breakthrough, needs. We have, basically the building blocks in place today, the technological tools to move mountains. And so when I look to the future, I'm extremely bullish and confident that 2030 will look radically different than it does today. I think business models will evolve. I think manufacturing ecosystems will be more connected. Manufacturing processes will be more efficient, more safe, and more responsive to customer needs. And we're going to be producing better, smarter products for the people in more sustainable ways. And last but not least, I think it's going to be much more rewarding for all of the employees and stakeholders involved.
Well, one cannot help but feel very positive after all those comments. And I completely share with you everything that was said. And one of the other things that I think it also makes the outlook very positive is what I've witnessed over my nearly 25 years in manufacturing is kind of the spirit of innovation in manufacturing people. It's baked into the DNA, continuous improvement. It's there for, constantly, and it's ever present. And I think that's one of the factors that makes it so positive for me. One of the key findings of the white paper is that the industry appears poised to enter kind of a new phase of the digital transition in manufacturing, kind of a more serious and developed and more focused attention on data mastery, AI, autonomous operations to some extent, and building what we call, or what we're calling, digital business ecosystems. What do you think the opportunities in this next phase are going to be? And what are some of the challenges you think may be associated with them? Let me again start with Randall on this one. and then we'll go through our panelists. Randall?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most immediate opportunity is going to be improved resiliency in the supply chain, which is badly needed and will drive significant value. I think as you think about the digital journey, and David, you were just referring to it, but as you begin to think of moving from monitored to controlled to optimized to autonomous, you eventually move to this concept of the systems of systems, where an organizational system is no longer siloed. It's really now interconnected with their other partners in the supply chain. And as you think of that evolution, the volume of data that would be generated as you start to manage these supply chains is going to be unmanageable with today's processes and technologies. And that you're moving to this autonomous manufacturing capability between different partners. And I think the benefits there are going to be significant in terms of improved ability to shift your manufacturing, to understand where you need to shift your supply sources and your production plans. There's going to be the opportunity to do more personalization so that you've got a lot of one. The ability for AI to improve your carbon footprint if you're tying it back to sustainability. And I think the last benefit will be that this also provides a new attractive capability from a workforce perspective. I think in the research, 65% of the jobs that exist in 2030 don't exist today. I think a lot of those will be around how AI is improving resiliency in the supply chain.
Yeah, very good points. Let me bring Andrew Kinder and Dan Dwight into this conversation, and then we'll go to Brad. Andrew, what's your view on this next phase?
Well, firstly, echo Randall's. In fact, I'm actually at a supply chain conference at the moment, and funnily enough, resiliency and connectivity was the number one thing that we were talking about in terms of where they see the next phase of digitization in the business. So I'll stick with the AI theme, because I mean, when people often ask, what technology do you think will change the world in the next 10 years, we don't have to stargaze. It's often, the answer is often staring us in the face. It's often the technologies that are there today that are not yet mainstream. And I think AI and machine learning is that technology. It's taken 10 years for us to do amazing things with iPhones or RPA or EV, and it will take us 10 years to get to enterprise level maturity with AI. So it's still in its infancy. There are great use cases out there. I'm sure there are many people on this call and in the audience that will have those use cases, and we often see them around predictive maintenance and around how we make life and worker, make decisions with them and for them. We'll learn to trust that in a better way, in the same way that we trust and rely on our sat navs. We don't get out the map and cross-check what Waze is telling us. We just accept it as it goes. And I think that's what will happen with operational decision making and supply chain decision making. We'll learn to trust those algorithms. So I think there's fantastic opportunities around AI. It's only just beginning. You asked, what are some of the challenges there? I will say one of the challenges that came out of some of the research that you've done and others have done is, we have to pay attention to data. It's always been those three things, isn't it? It's people, process, and technology. Well, I think we have to have the fourth one, the people, process, data, and technology, because, we have to have that data mastery that you referred to in your white paper. We know we're very good at getting data now out of devices. We know how to stream it into data lakes. We're on that era of turning that data, insights into execution, but we do need to, mature our use of that data mastery. So that will, I think, one of the challenges that we need to face up to.
Yeah, thank you very much. Dan Dwight from Cooley Group, you're on the ground making product every day. Around the country and in Canada. What's your feeling about, and you've been on the M4.0 trail a long time, what's your feeling about the next phase, and what are you looking for to happen in that phase, and what are some of the challenges you see?
Sure, Dave, thank you. I'm not sure you can say, you use the term more serious. I would say more complex. This is coming from the perspective of a middle market manufacturer who, to your comment, David, we are 8 years into the digital evolution. Before getting to data mastery, Cooley first had to go from legacy to smart tech, making material investments in both hardware and software. now, like others, we're getting to that next phase of the M4.0 journey. A, a journey, I mean, a phase that we think is going to be a whole lot more complicated. You know, we're starting to get access to real-time data. We're learning to master the data. This mastery is going to lead to the uses Andrew mentioned, the use of AI, or more specifically in Cooley's case, you know, the use of implementation of complex algorithms to drive our extruders rather than relying on human operators. To make this process work, our organization needs to develop confidence in how we analyze this influx of data, confidence that the data we're gathering is telling the right story. As the white paper references, this problem becomes even more complex as the amount of data compounds, and then gets further complicated as the next phase of the digital evolution traverses across the entire company. To address this complexity, to even rethink how we measure productivity and performance, we're going to have to continuously be rethinking our business model. As you can tell, I'm excited about trying to solve this problem, but it's a significant challenge nonetheless.
Two very good points just made by the panelists, one about trust and one about complexity. Brad Newman, what's your perspective? And do you agree with what Dan is saying about the complexity?
You know, absolutely. I do think when you look at manufacturers, clearly, they're not all the same, right? You look at a bill of materials and you look at, one company versus another, and sometimes just inherent in the number of parts and layers in a bill, the degree of vertical, integration, et cetera, things are different. And so I think, but generally speaking, I think, complexity is something in particular that is, being dealt with inside the four walls. One thing I was thinking about a little bit, the digitalization that you're referring to, and we think of manufacturers, right? That's what's happening inside the four walls of a manufacturing facility, but it's also, kind of the bigger picture as it relates to the, the end-to-end, supply or value chain. And so as a general observation, I think what we're seeing is, companies have a bit of a head start as it relates to the digitization of their supply chain. And so, whether it's, more accurate forecasting, optimized planning, we're starting to see visibility throughout, transportation and distribution. There's a tremendous amount of progress being made, and I think one of the challenges is that's putting a lot of pressure on manufacturing, quite frankly, to I would say catch up. And I think that's where the complexity that Dan just referenced really kind of comes into play, because it's no easy task. And at the same time, as the supply chain gets more intelligent and optimized and autonomous, it creates a need for yet, potentially even more flexibility and, agility within the four walls. And so the capital investment required to make those changes in a lot of companies is huge. We've had companies, quite frankly, the last 2 years have been tough, right? There've been no shortage of challenges, in particular in an operating environment, and net new skills are going to be required to adopt a lot of this new technology that we're referring to. And so we are seeing a lot of companies that are, I think we've all often talked about, kind of pilot purgatory, right? I think companies are in pilot purgatory, but they understand the same. And I think the big challenge today is everybody's figuring out, how do we scale this and how do we move at a faster pace?
And of course, scaling brings along with it its own complexity. I want to probe a little bit on this point, this complexity point, and for the audience members who have not read the white paper, which is hard to believe at this point. There is a chapter on complexity for your reference, but I want to probe a little bit about this and get Randall and Bhaskar's and Andrew's viewpoint on this issue. How would you measure this issue and address it, assuming that it's as real as we think it is and it's going to be? Randall? You're on mute.
Well, I mean, I think it's very real. I think, you know, I'm actually in Seattle right now. We're meeting with we've got a workshop tomorrow with a company on change management and how do you manage all of the uncertainty. You know, we're introducing this workshop by presenting the concept of we are in a multi-shock world. We're also using the term VUCA, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and accelerating. And that companies need to understand that the pace of change is different, and that how do you instill that digital culture in your organization becomes a differentiator, both in terms of your performance, but also in terms of how you attract talent to your organization.
Bhaskar, Andrew, any comment on this complexity issue that Dan has brought up? Bhaskar, you want to go first? But I think you're on mute also. And now you're not.
Thank you. So no, I agree with all the panelists here, right? So the complexity needs to be looked at from different dimensions, right? Technology is one. The other one is about empowering your workforce. That's a huge challenge that the industry is facing today. And also, how do we simplify some of these business processes from a business process perspective across the value chain? So there is unfortunately no single answer to this. It has to be looked at it from multiple dimensions, and this has to be a very focused, and the organizations will have to take a cognizant effort to kind of reduce the complexity across different value streams and different focus areas. So unfortunately, it is not just one simple complexity to solve. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, Andrew, is this kind of, are we in the territory that's kind of the equivalent of the real estate mantra, which of course is location, 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 but in our case, is it architecture, architecture, architecture? The answer to the complexity problem, because it is going to grow, is architecture, software architecture.
I think technology, let's not just say software, technology has a part to play, I think, in simplifying complexity. I mean, for some, you may be forgiven for thinking, wow, my IT is more complex than it ever was. But if we think about how user experiences are changing, how user interfaces are changing, how user interfaces are disappearing, there'll be less and less and fewer humans interacting with laptops in the same way that we did. But so there's a place for technology in simplifying the complex simply by the computing power that you have available to understand, to assimilate, to provide intelligence, to provide real decision-making thought and guidance to us as human beings in ways that we could not do ourselves. So taking complexity out, but it does require the strength and the attention for the vendors, the software vendors like Infor, to focus its attention on algorithms, on intelligence, on higher level intelligence, and on making sure that we can take these complex decisions and simplify them and give operators what they really want, which is informed decisions. And that's the higher level purpose that they're looking for.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a very interesting subject. I'm sure we're going to come back to it in a future webinar. But let's move on and jump on something we've touched on briefly. I think Randall's brought it up, and that's this finding in the white paper that suggests that one of the new important frontiers ahead of us is the creation of these digital business ecosystems. Over the last 10 years or so, the industry has been focused very, very much, as it should be, on M4.0 generating greater efficiency, better cost effectiveness, incremental improvements in operations. Looking forward, the white paper suggests that we're going to move toward a much broader rethinking of basic business models and reinventing business models around these business ecosystem concepts as well as others. What are your thoughts about this? And what do you think the trajectory might look like on this? Let's start with Bhaskar.
Sure. Absolutely, yes, right. So this is only going to evolve. So think about it. Digital would have become yesterday's advantage if the organizations are not thinking about evolving to the next level, right? So with that said, the organization must think differently about their transformation initiatives or about their own transformation. So the traditional ways of operating become a thing of the past if they are not evolving to the next level, right? So therefore, with the people, process, and the digital infrastructure they create with these digital technologies, manufacturers should think about reinventing their business models, such as outcome-based pricing models or usage-based pricing models or the product as a service, in other words, the servitization, and offering their own customers a more personalized products or services specific to their own customers' choice. So, and also a more, looking beyond the traditional ways of, operating beyond, like, for example, the closed loop processes, or even to an extent of asset sharing, etc., should be looked at as a natural evolution, leveraging the digital infrastructure they're looking to create with today's available technologies and the infrastructure. So that's where I'm looking at it, and obviously this is only going to go to the next level in evolving to that digital maturity that we are referring to.
Yeah, it's a big step, and I suppose with some it could be a little scary. Brad Newman, what's your view on this? You agree that our next big step is going to be these broader ecosystems?
You know, I do agree, and I would go as far as saying, some of the leading companies are well down the road now. And so when I just think of the volume of discussions that we're having with our clients, especially kind of post-pandemic, the number of discussions we're having around this very topic are increasing, exponentially. And so, really, when you think of manufacturing for decades, business models have really largely been, focused on growth through, product improvement and innovation or market expansion. And, in the new world is, manufacturers continue to face increased competition globally. This whole concept of, end market, disruption and just evolving customer needs. Many manufacturers are really just starting to realize that they can no longer rely on, product innovation alone when they look to the future and growth. And so we are seeing, a lot of the early innovators really, broadening their thinking now. They're looking to capture value in new and different ways. Albeit, connected products, embedded services, outcomes-based commercial models. There are lots of different, kind of variants of how you get there. But, the profit pools are shifting in many industries. And, the good news, I would say, is that, manufacturers do have the upper hand, and they're in a powerful position to retain or really, become leaders within their respective value chain. But I think the point of caution here is that, everyday competitors, not only from inside, but quite frankly, from outside, our sector, are forming, new ecosystems new alliances, new business relationships to manage and profit in new ways. And so, to win in the future, I think this has to be, front and center for manufacturers. And I think, if you're not careful, you'll end up, watching from the sidelines as, someone else takes control of your value chain.
Yeah, very interesting. And I'm sure for some, it'll be a new competency to have to develop. This is not an easy thing to do. Andrew Kinder, what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think there's going to be this change, this shift from operation centricity to increasingly customer centricity. You mentioned that in your white paper. You can call it servitization, but a real emphasis on the customer. And in doing that, you are transforming business models and building new ecosystems. And I was with a customer just a couple of weeks ago. It's a very good example story. They're based in Sweden. They're in the aquaculture industry. They basically, their business is to produce the equipment that salmon farmers either on land or at sea would use, and you would think of themselves 10 years ago, they would probably think of themselves as an equipment producer, and that's where the story ends. But they completely transformed themselves. They now see their purpose in life is really to help the salmon farmer improve salmon farming. So they really see themselves as precision farming, and they're providing equipment. They're providing with partners. They're providing the IoT equipment, the data, the sensors, the expertise to take salmon farming to a new level. With tackling disease, tackling health, tackling sustainability challenges, and they're doing it with technology, IoT, data, analytics, predictive maintenance, all those things, but also with the partnerships that they're bringing for that equipment, so that they become effectively a full services provider for the salmon farmer. So a transformation of a business model, a transformation that's based on technology, but also based on vision. You could have had all that technology and not had that vision and not had that success. So I do see leaders, making those transformational shifts and finding, what their real purpose is in the value chain, and really taking ownership of it. And it's very exciting when you see that happening.
Yeah, very interesting. Dan Dwight from Cooley, what's your thoughts about the broader ecosystem?
Yeah, let me build off of Andrew's comments around the ecosystem and really the transformation of that ecosystem. To me, all companies, regardless of their relationship to M4.0, demand reinvention. To rest too firmly on last year's sort of expectations, last year's commitments, in my view, prevents your ability to evolve. As I constantly repeat at Cooley ad nauseum, and for the Cooley folks on the call, they know exactly what I'm going to say right now. The only constant is change. And I don't mean incremental change. I mean, if you look at among the Cooley changers, early on, we went through a deep cultural transformation to break down our silos in order to derive collaboration with the objective of becoming more adaptive and more agile. But for companies that are not change driven, have not been investing in digitization, who are not rethinking and reinventing, they're no different. And I'm going to completely date myself here, no different than the Digital Equipment Corporation. So for those younger folks on the call, Digital invented the mini computer to displace large mainframes and was the computer company in the 80s and 90s. But then they failed to evolve as desktop computing displaced mini computers. They are now gone. And unless you're my age, you probably don't even know who they are. It's interesting, I think, as MLC members, I think we sometimes forget that we are the M4.0 converts, the true believers in the power of digitization. There are a lot of manufacturers outside this limited MLC fraternity who are not in the digital game or getting into the game awfully late. They're the ones that are failing to see the power of the digital evolution, the power of transforming yourself on a constant basis.
Well said, Dan. I thought almost you were going to break into a song.
I was going to, but I remember my first job at Digital, and I really realized how old I am.
I thought you were going to break into and who could ask for anything more, all right? Yes, I remember Digital. Ken Olsen, the founder of Digital, was infamous for dismissing the personal computer as a toy.
Yeah. Much to his demise.
Yes, much to his demise. Let's move on. We want to, audience, if you haven't put any comments or questions in the function on your screen, please do so. We'll get to it shortly. We've got a couple of questions more to go through. And these are kind of lightning round questions I want to ask our panel. As you navigate toward the vision of 2030 envisioned in the white paper, what's the most important thing manufacturing leaders should focus on to prepare for the future? Now, this can be a one-word answer or just a few words. So let's go around the table. Randall.
I'd say it's really by starting and putting together your strategic vision and plan. I mean, we are working right now with a client who was divested out of a spin out, and they were so focused on the separation agreement, but that they realized they didn't have that strategic plan in terms of where they were going. And so we're not seeing the forest through the trees. So I think it's critically important to really, if you don't have that strategic vision of where your industry and where you are going to be in 2030, then you need to start thinking about that and putting that together, because it sets the roadmap for your digital rollout and plan.
Bhaskar.
I call this as a six-pillar, strategy. This needs to be looked at it from a different dimensions. One is a fully integrated strategy with a very clear transformation goals in mind. The second one is about the leadership commitment all the way from the board to the CEO through the middle management. And the third one is about having a right team with a high caliber tech talent, subject matter experts. So it's extremely critical that you need the high powered, high caliber. Third aspect. The fourth one is, focus on the agility, the agile governance, or the mindset, the agile mindset that drives the broader adoption of this technology and work on the transformation. And the fourth one is about, or rather the fifth one is about how do you measure success, right? Which means that effective monitoring mechanism of tracking the progress, and how do you define success, and make sure that you outline success very upfront and then measure that. And the last is about business-led modular and technology and data platform, which means that choose the right technology which can enable the transformation effort. And then it is extremely critical that you need a right digital infrastructure, and the data platform is what is required.
Okay, well, that's a basket full of important things. Andrew, what's your pick? You can have a basket too if you'd like.
No, I'll say, you asked what leaders should focus on. Focus on people. When we talk about a talent shortage, this is not just a local talent shortage; it's a global talent shortage, right? I mean, and it's not going to change. It's not going to go away. So technology again can help. So focus on. There's going to be a change, and it's already started from location centric to human centric. And so focus on the reduction or elimination of any non-value added tasks that we still ask humans to do. Why are we still doing data entry when intelligent things or intelligent machines and equipment can do that non-value added work, and leave these high value things that we call humans to do high value decision making work. So focus on the people, bring the people with you.
Okay, we have people checked off. Dan Dwight.
Yeah, I think that building that digital business ecosystem is only going to reach its full potential when the entire organization is digitally driven and driven seamlessly across traditional functional lines. There's a memorable quote in the white paper. I think I may get this right. Digital is agnostic about functional boundaries. I believe this transformation is going to be the most difficult piece of the digital evolution that leaders are going to have to be grappling with.
Well said. And now lastly, thinking in broad terms about where the industry is working toward, what's the one outcome you would like to see by 2030 from all the investments manufacturers are making in digital? including the technologies, but also all the change management, all the rethinking, et cetera, et cetera. Is it agility? Is it speed? Is it reinvention? Is it something else? Let's go around the table and start with Brad.
Yeah, David, I'm a competitive guy. I like to win, and I love manufacturing. And while, the future includes a lot of, cross-sector collaboration with other industries, I'd really like to see manufacturing, take the lead role in really leveraging this capital investment to create these new business models and ecosystems where, quite frankly, we lead and control our respected, value chains. And I believe our ability to do that is going to help, make the investments and fund a lot of what needs to be done in the areas of safety, sustainability, and the development of our people.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let's go to Dan next.
I think the most important chapter in the white paper, it was chapter 11, the circular industrial economy. Environment and sustainability, to me, is the future of manufacturing. I'll quote NAM's Competing to Win roadmap I was just reading. Manufacturers need to create cleaner, safer, and more inclusive communities. I was saying earlier on to the panelists before the call started, before ECG was even an acronym, we repositioned Cooley's business model around the 3 pillars of sustainable growth: economic prosperity, environmental stewardship, and social responsibility. I believe as a manufacturer, or even more importantly, as an MLC member manufacturer, or collectively we, have a leadership responsibility to our company's respective stakeholders, which at Cooley we include the communities where we operate, to drive that environmental stewardship and social responsibility over the coming decade and beyond.
Well said, Dan. Andrew?
Yeah, I'm just going to carry straight on with what Dan said. I mean, you said in the question, in the broader sense, what's your hope? So I picked up on the words broader sense and hope. I truly hope that by 2030, we will have something positive to report, on our global efforts to reduce emissions. It is not just a practice for food or for those who are looking for a brand image. It is now proven to be a sustainable business strategy as well as a sustainable strategy. And so, we could think about using digitization for sustainability. The technologies are available for us to do that in terms of visibility, in terms of measurement, in terms of optimization, reduce, recycle, reuse. It just requires the right strategies and the right mindset to be in place. So that's what I would hope for 2030.
And it's going to be one of the subjects we address at the AI conference in December. Bhaskar, you're up, and then we'll go to Randall. Bhaskar, what's your one outcome that you're hoping for?
An intelligent, more agile, responsive, data-driven organization focusing on safety, sustainability, and creating additional revenue models to drive growth.
Very succinct. Thank you very much. Randall, you've got the last word.
Yeah, no, I would echo what Dan and Andrew had highlighted. It's got to be sustainable manufacturing, because if we don't address this, this is an urgent priority. If we don't address it, the 2040 is going to have a whole set of bigger and different challenges that we're going to leave to our children to solve. So we have to solve and provide sustainable manufacturing today. And just a couple thoughts. One is, I think every day we can say, what are we doing to help move the needle in that regard? Tomorrow I'm going to be working with the finance team. How does it report ESG reporting? Okay, what am I going to do on Friday? So I think we have to take that approach where it's every day, what am I doing? And then the second is, I'm going to also date myself. I think there's an old Gatorade commercial that says, I want to be like Mike. And I think, hearing what Dan and the Cooley group are doing, I think every mid-market, every enterprise manufacturing CEO should be like, I want to be like Dan, who's leading around sustainability because it's economically beneficial and because it's good for the future of our planet.
Well, thank you very much. Lauren Bissett, let's take some questions or comments. Do we have any in the chat?
Of course we do.
Great. Fire away.
We'll start with this one. How do you see augmented reality fitting into digitization?
Okay, who'd like to take that one? Augmented reality, how it fits into digitization. Anyone?
Well,
Andrew?
in terms of state,
go ahead, Andrew.
I was going to say, well, I was going to say, in first of status, where you've seen it today, it is breaking through, and it's breaking through in areas of safety. That's one areas, and in training, in operator training. I think it has a higher level purpose, but in terms of status today, training, making things visible that would otherwise be invisible, helping in the areas of construction and other areas where you can look to see where. Get design right first time, rather than design first, build and then correct later. So it's certainly breaking in at various industries at Point Solutions.
Okay, Lauren, how many do we have? I don't want to pass each question around to everybody because it'll lead up too much time. I want to get to as many questions as possible. What's next?
Okay, so, and I know some of this was touched on, but this is a little more specific. It's a long question. And then I have a good one after this that I think multiple panelists should answer.
Okay.
But what does the panel think about the current economic environment slowing investments on Industry 4.0 and sustainability by manufacturers and being more cost focused to manage, I can't read this, inflationary expectations by their customers?
Inflationary expectations?
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the, are we heading into a recession question? Who'd like to take a shot at that? Brad, what are you hearing from let me just push this out. Brad, what are you hearing from all your customers? You have a very broad view here, I would imagine.
Yeah, and I would say, the answers vary by subsector, right? And so, one of the areas is aerospace and defense. If you look at what's going on in defense right now with the countries all over the world a lot of countries increasing, their defense spending to, target like 3% of GDP as an example. I mean, we're seeing a ton of spending in that area. Auto, you look at just what's going on with electrification right now. And so despite the semiconductor shortage and other things, there's just a tremendous amount of energy going into what I'll call, the disruption and related opportunities, in auto. And the chemical industry may be a little different, right? We are seeing a drop in end market demand. We're seeing, some declining prices, and we're seeing assets that have been running full tilt for years on end. The companies have the opportunity to squeeze in some changeovers and other things. And so I think it's hard to generalize, across the board. I will say, a lot of what we're talking about, these are big capital investments. I think it's probably fair to say, as a general rule, we're seeing companies not necessarily stop, but in many cases, temper or, slow things down. And I think a lot of companies are hopeful that, should we end up in a recession, that it's short-lived.
Yeah. Randall, comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say the data that I've seen is just in terms of sentiment is that the number's gone up from July from 42% to up to 62% that are projecting a recession. But I think there's sufficient data that's shown that, especially within manufacturing, those companies that invest in manufacturing see a much quicker and higher return on the upslope. So it's, think about a race car going through a turn. We're in that recession, it's a turn, but if you invest, you can spin out more quickly. And an example of that is a manufacturer that we're working with has 2 plants in India. They recognize that those plants are not optimal. So maybe during this downturn, they use that as an opportunity to build their next generation manufacturing footprint, because now they have the capacity to invest in building. So use this time to invest to accelerate through the rebound.
Yeah, thank you. Lauren, next question. We have time for one more.
This is going to be our last question. If there's any questions that aren't answered, we will do our best to follow up via email to make sure that it is addressed. So feel free to keep them coming. So our last question is, what is one recommendation or several recommendations you have for manufacturers who are not willing or ready for change?
That's a That's a good one. Who'd like to take that one first? Bhaskar, I see a smile breaking out on your face. You're on mute. Can't hear him.
Yeah.
All right.
So
I hope it's like
with-
organizer I haven't muted, so that's fine. So I think change is definitely one of the critical items that one must consider before the transformation. So it's a hard answer, but let me be brutally honest. If there is no change, the transformation is not possible. I think it has been highlighted multiple times in multiple ways and occasions in the white paper that recently submitted. I think there are more engaging ways to enable the change management and training. There are a lot of avenues to be looked at it. But I think change is definitely a vital component for a massive transformation. But again, even if you want to start something small, I think the cultural change as well as the leadership mindset change, as well as the people change is certainly a critical aspect for the transformation. I think that's my take on it, David.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else on this? Dan, Dwight?
So David, I would, if they're in the specialty material space, I've got a very easy fix. We'll just buy you.
I'll
use an example. So at the end of, in December of 2020, we did a significant acquisition. We implemented, the only constant is change. We've completely integrated the company. It's culturally completely integrated. It's completely collaborative. We've grown the top line 50% and got millions of dollars worth of synergies out of the business. And it was all driven simply by focusing on change and focusing on M4.0 digitization.
Dan, being an ex-GE guy, I thought you were going to quote Jack Welch and say, change before you have to.
Yeah, I was going to. Then I'm really dating myself here.
Andrew, I think you have the last word.
I was just going to say that I don't think there are manufacturing companies that aren't willing to change, but maybe the questioner is actually saying perhaps there are manufacturers who need some help with their change, and that's something that maybe the MLC can take on as something where it could just be as simple as education. I think every manufacturer wants to change. They want to be leaders. They want to be the best, but they might need some help in getting there.
They may just not know how.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. Lauren, are we at the end?
We are at the end, so I think we are going to have to wrap it up. And just so everyone knows, because I see some questions coming in, you will all get a copy of this white paper, and David will probably talk about it in just a moment.
Okay. What do we have to do to close up? We have a couple of other pieces of information for our audience. Here is the white paper. This is how you can get it on that using that URL. I recommend it to you. Get a large cup of coffee. It's worth your time and investment, and read it. Next. I mentioned our upcoming Manufacturing in 2030 project conference in December. Let's talk about AI. We're going to take an in-depth look at all phases of AI in manufacturing. As the panelists have rightly indicated, AI is a very special technology, and it's going to permeate everything you do in your manufacturing company. And it is indeed, and it's going to be, if you haven't made a decision yet, it is a strategic business decision. This is not just a technological decision. It's a strategic business decision. So mark that in your calendars. You can register now, and we look forward to seeing you at the conference in Nashville. Next. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to the panelists, Randall, Bhaskar, Andrew, Dan, and our partner from EY, Brad. I appreciate you taking the time to be part of the panel today and sharing your thoughts on the white paper, and for your help in reviewing it and all the great comments that you provided on it. It made it a stronger white paper. Thank you very much. Audience, thanks for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you on a future MLC webinar. I'm David Brosell. Have a great day. And thanks again once for joining us.
Cheers. Thank you, folks.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers.